From 365 Radio, good friend of ours, Jeff Howe, at Jeff Howe, Howe, 247, covers Texas for 247, also Longhorn_Blitz. Jeff, thanks for your time. There was an incredible build-up for that game with LSU the year that Burrow and LSU ran the table and had that record-breaking offense. Is this similar?
The only difference with Smokey, that game was it was a primetime game. Heck of a party in Austin all weekend. And, my prevailing thought from that game is, the Tom Herman era at Texas kind of peaked right in that minute before that 3rd and 17 where Justin Jefferson burned off on the Texas defense. But that's the only difference. Everybody, I don't know that either fan base or college football fans at large will ever be okay with this game being an 11 a.m. kick. It probably deserves better. But no, it's the buzz, the atmosphere, game days in town, Fox's big noon kickoff is coming to town. You can kind of feel, it's a Wednesday, and you can already feel it. The only other game on the schedule where you get this in Austin is the week of the Oklahoma game, and then this feels much bigger. So yeah, it's pretty thick already.
Jeff, the obvious difference between these two teams will be along the fronts, in that Alabama has a lot more experience and a lot more skill up there. What do you think Texas will do on either side of the ball to try and stem that tide?
I think offensively, Paul, when you look at the Texas offense against the Bama defense, two things. One, Steve Sarkisian, he loves pre-snap motions and shifts. He loves moving guys around. He loves manipulating things at the mesh point with the RPO game. That stuff has to matter. It can't be window dressing. The intent has to be there with that stuff from the jump. Because if you can do one thing with this Alabama defense, Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell, those guys on the edge, you can kind of use their aggressiveness and their speed against them, get their eyes in the wrong place. If you give them different stuff to look at, and again, do some stuff and kind of manipulate things at the mesh point. So that stuff has to matter. There was also a really interesting tweet that Sark made in the UL Monroe game. Jaleel Billingsley, the Alabama transfer tight end, sitting out with serving a 6-game NCAA suspension. So it kind of made Jatavian Sanders, moved him from a guy that they were going to use more as an inline guy. Now that he's the guy that they're moving around a little bit. So they moved Andre Carrick in and used him. He lost the left tackle job to Kelvin Banks, the talented true freshman at camp. They're taking Carrick, and there were 5-6 snaps the other night when they played him as a tight end. Now, I'm sure that package, if it's going to be a part of the offense, will be more expansive this week. And then my thing, Paul, if you're going to bring extra guys in to help block, these edge guys from Alabama, it feels like, well, chip them with the tight end or chip them with the back. Well, number one, don't waste valuable passing game assets as blockers, and two, just throw an extra offensive lineman in there. So that's some of the kind of stuff Sark's going to do with the Texas defense. I think it's simpler, much simpler than that, Paul. I think they've just got to take chances. The game that I think about last year with them was the Arkansas game, where they just try to play Arkansas straight up. They stayed in the too high shell look and were pretty vanilla up front. And I think once Arkansas figured out that's all Texas was going to do, that's when Arkansas started gashing them in the run game. Pete Kwiatkowski's a guy that doesn't take a ton of chances. But I think this is where you'll kind of see some of that Gary Patterson influence. I think the Gary Patterson impact in this game and all season really for Texas is going to be if the front and the coverage is on the Texas defense, if they mesh. Last season, you could look at what Texas was doing up front, look at what they were trying to do on the back end, and a lot of times nothing seemed to make sense. I think Gary Patterson's going to help Pete Kwiatkowski out there, but they've got to take some chances up front, kind of get out of their element a little bit. Again, it's a defensive front that doesn't do a ton of two-man games or a ton of twists, a ton of shooting gaps. But you're going to have to do something out of your comfort zone to try to create some negative plays to get that Alabama offense behind the chains and give yourself a chance.
Jeff, I don't know about you, but it was just so nice to actually see Quinn Ewers play as opposed to talking about what he may or may not do. Like, we finally got to just see him play a game. What were your thoughts on the debut of Ewers?
Well, then after the game, we were all talking about his car getting towed.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just kind of par for the course for Quinn. No, I think what really stood out to me was how calm he was. You could even see sideline, you can see from the press box. After he threw that interception, there wasn't a ton of panic in him. And he stayed the course, and that's the kind of stuff that's going to help him in this game. And personality relates to his play. You kind of see it like I've said this already this week. It's tough to remain as calm as he is, have the kind of pocket awareness he showed in that game on Saturday, and make some of those off-platform throws and throws where they really move you off the spot and get your feet moving. It's hard to make some of those throws and be poised if you're just or you're just constantly up and down all the time. So I think that demeanor he's got, that even-keeled demeanor, that's going to help him tenfold in this game because Alabama game, they were very vanilla in that game. They didn't show anything. So Quinn Ewers is going to see stuff from this particular group, this particular Alabama defense. He's the stuff from Nick Saban and Pete Golding that he didn't come close to seeing from them on tape, and that he didn't come close to seeing last week because it's a totally different piece. We're talking about UL. There were some throws where I thought he just maybe muscled it up a little bit on some of the deep balls, but overall, that pocket awareness and the ability to make kind of those off-schedule, off-platform throws, that's the kind of stuff we saw from him in high school that we heard he was doing behind the scenes. Opponent, the caliber of ULM, which, as we know, it's not a high-caliber opponent. It was just good to see him go out there, bounce back from the interception, and go play good football.
It's ironic that they're playing Alabama. Of course, they'll be a part of the SEC. That was the series, or these games were scheduled before any of that happened. Like Brigham Young and Baylor played last year. They're playing this year before any of Brigham Young being a part of the Big 12 happened. How much of this do you think will be the storyline of eventually they're going to be a part of the same conference? Will too much be made of that no matter what happens in this game?
Maybe, Smoak. Yeah, the only SEC tie-in for me kind of goes back to that Arkansas game last year, right? And we can look at Texas under Tom Herman. They beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, but we can all debate how much Georgia wanted to be there, whether they cared or not. And, the LSU game, that was a game that went down to the last couple possessions. But again, that was, I think, before LSU really became that juggernaut that we saw them be in 19. And I think when you have a coaching change, you have a culture change, you have roster turnover. Texas went to Fayetteville last year, and Sarkis has said it this week. Look, they weren't physically ready to match up with Arkansas, and they weren't mentally ready to go into Fayetteville and understand what it took to play in that league. So I think that's the thing, Smokey, that they can take from that game last year and take from that game this year. Maybe there are games in the Big 12 where you can get away with not playing a completely physical game, playing at your best when it comes to physicality aspect. Man, in that league, you don't get a Saturday off. I know it's become more space and pace, but it is college football's ultimate line of scrimmage league. So if there's anything from an SEC slant that I'm looking for on Saturday, not even for Texas to win the vast majority of their one-on-one battles in the trenches with Alabama, but can they just for maybe sustain some stretches where it looks like, okay, they're trending in the right direction in that area, and at least they look better to handle that on a week-to-week basis than they did in the Arkansas game last year.
Jeff, if this game does get out of hand, which with that, like great teams against Alabama, things get out of hand. It's usually not so much an indictment on your team as it is, what Nick Saban has built there. But has Steve Sarkisian been able to do enough inside that locker room where they can clear this one and not let Alabama beat them twice?
You hope so, because you look at the schedule, they've got a good UTSA team coming into Austin next week. So I think that fall is going to be the biggest challenge for this team. No matter the result, whether you look, we've seen crazier things happen, right? If Texas were to win this game, if it's a game in the fourth quarter that comes down to the last possession, or it's a game that everybody's kind of checked out by the middle of the third quarter, whatever the result is, can you flush it on Sunday internally? Because outside, we're going to talk about that game going into next week, and probably around this time next week, we'll start looking at UTSA. I mean, that's just kind of the pulse of the fan base. I think that's to be expected. But, internally, can you flush that result and move on? Because that's one thing, all that they didn't do last year. Last year, they let it snowball. They let the Oklahoma game affect them going into the Oklahoma State game. And then that's just kind of a game. But to where by the time, the Baylor game is a perfect example. Like when things started to go downhill towards the end of the first half, like you could feel it. Like there was no question of, is Texas going to unravel? It's okay. When are they going to fully unravel? So that to me, he's worked all off season on fixing that. That to me is going to be the big test, though, if that works or not, is what product do they put on the field next week against UTSA, regardless of what the result this weekend looks like.
Jeff, from just, we spend months and months talking about every facet of these teams that we cover, and then we get to the season and we have some things confirmed, but there's also some surprises. Was there anything, in finally seeing them in action, that suddenly has popped up as kind of a new thing that you're monitoring, or maybe perhaps some confirmation on something you've been thinking along the way?
I think two things, Craig, and it kind of rolls into one. I think just how good and how ready some of these true freshmen are. I mean, that's one thing. Like you can hear about it in camp and hear about it from sources, but to actually see it, to actually see Kelvin Banks go out there and play. We played 37, 38 snaps the other night and look really good doing it, not allow a single pressure and really hold his own at left tackle. That sudden violence Jalen Gilbo played with in the secondary. A young guy like Barron Sorrell, who flashed in the limited amount of snaps he got last year, come out and have, a sack and a half and 2 TFLs and really lead them up front. A game where, again, Texas was really vanilla on defense. They just counted on their guys to win one-on-one battles, and Barron Sorrell won his. So I think just that, Craig. I think some of the young guys that you kind of heard about, hey, he's coming along. He's really good. He can make an immediate impact. Some of those immediate impact guys making a difference. I think, and I'll throw Jatavian Sanders in there as well. Again, kind of a more expanded role than maybe I think anybody, myself included, thought he was going to have, especially in the wake of the Jaleel Billingsley suspension. Stuff that I think bothers you. There was a 3rd and long that they allowed a 20-something yard completion that got ULM into the red zone. I think situationally, some clock management at the end of the first half, some of the stuff that popped up last year. It's one of those deals. Is that just clunky because it's the opener? Is that just a continuation of some of the bad stuff? So that would be kind of the give and take thing for me.
How much fun is just having this game so early and no matter the result? And this is kind of a game that sometimes UT has been somebody that ends streaks. I know they're a heavy underdog, but this is kind of interesting to me. I just love the fact they're playing.
Boy, Smokey, that's spoken like a true lover of Nebraska football right there. We talk about ending streaks. Texas has had a habit of that. No, I think regardless of, whether you love Texas, you hate Texas, you love Alabama, you hate Alabama. I think if you love college football, you see those two brands, those two helmets, those colors flash on the field. Man, it's just awesome. And I like the fact that, Alabama hasn't played a true non-conference road game in 11 years. So it's not like Nick Saban takes his team on the road in a non-conference game every year. So for them to do this, it is a really big deal. And you start thinking about the history between these two programs, not just talking about, the game in Pasadena in January of 2010, but you think about, the 65 Orange Bowl, Joe Namath and Tommy Nobis, and the moving the Orange Bowl into prime time for the first time, and Bear Bryant against Darryl Rowe. You think about just all the history with these two programs. Like I said, I don't care if you love Texas, hate Texas, love Bama, hate Bama. Man, if you love college football, you should be really excited to watch this game on Saturday.
2011, wasn't it, when they played at Penn State? Was that the last time they had a true road game?
That's it, Smokey. That was the last true road non-conference game in Alabama.
They've played a bunch of good non-conference games, like at least one a year, but it's been in Arlington, Orlando, Atlanta, and then that game I mentioned against Penn State after they had played Penn State in Tuscaloosa as well. Jeff, thank you. Enjoy it. This is fun. There's a lot of good ones this week. I call them bangers, and this is one of them, just to kind of just see what happens. We'll have evidence, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, the only reason I'm happy this is an 11 a.m. game is I will be home in plenty of time to watch Baylor BYU.
Yeah.
It's a hellaciously intriguing game Saturday night.
You got a lot of intrigue with that one as well. Thank you so much, Jeff Howe. Again, 247 Sports covers UT, and they